Okay, so today, which is Thursday, I am going to be walking you through how to do module 2 and 3 of the Anole Lizard Virtual Lab. Keep in mind, the main reason why we're doing this is to help you develop an understanding of what speciation is. In module 1 for the Lizard Virtual Lab, what you had to do was you first looked at 8 different anoles, lizards, and you were asked to group them. And then you were asked to give them a name. There was a drop down on the right-hand side where you could have dragged and then added a title for each one of your groupings. You then later on went ahead and did measurements. So you took measurements of their hind legs, hind limbs, you took measurements of their body and of their tail. And then you recorded all of those. Oh, and you also counted the lemmas of their pads. And so then what you did is you recorded all of your data, okay? So you really wanted to make sure that your measurements were as accurate as possible, and hopefully your data got saved somewhere. So those were the major outcomes of what you were asked to do for module 1. You then were supposed to figure out what an ecoform, what causes it, and then somewhere along the line you were supposed to figure out, based on what you're looking at in terms of those anoles, what would be evidence to support your idea of what an ecomorph is and what causes it. So that was all from module 1. We're now going to build on it with module 2. And it's going to seem a little bit challenging at times, but I'll try to go slow enough so that you understand what you're going to be doing, okay? So here's day 3. Again, it's the Lizard Evolution Lab. This is going to have 2 modules in it, module 2 and module 3, okay? And if you'll notice here, what's our daily goal is to explain how speciation and natural selection play a role in evolution. So the new component now is speciation. Speciation is when you're dealing with how individual species have formed. So one of the things I'm going to make sure you understand is what a species is. So what is a species versus variation? We were looking at variations before. We've dealt with variations. We did that with the rabbits. We dealt with in your assessment, we dealt with variations beforehand when we were looking at the different organisms and trying to see how they differed based on a mutation that occurred, right? So right now, I'm going to make sure that you have a good, clear definition of the difference between what makes something just a variation and what makes something a species, okay? We're then going to have to introduce the concepts of convergent and divergent, because one of the things you're going to find out is that's really the main focus of this entire module, to give you an idea of why species become species. And is it due to convergent evolution or is it due to divergent evolution? One of the final questions you're going to see dealing with our modules is going to be asking you something similar. So the 2 things we're going to be dealing with are phylogenies, okay? That's basically, you'll see in just a moment, the relationship between organisms. And then we're going to be doing some experimental data. So we're going to take the data that you've acquired, plus giving you some more data, and analyze it, okay? So the handouts I've given you are a little bit more detailed than some of the others maybe. I just wanted to make sure that you had those key slides in front of you. So I felt it was easier if I gave you those from the get-go, even though I am going to be going over all of it in this video, and I'll have the PowerPoint on Canvas like I usually do. But I wanted to have it right there in front of you so you could see where the values came from, okay? And so then, okay, so let's go ahead and go on here. Oh, sorry, he's always barking away. So the first question is, what's a species? Okay, so what is a species? One of the things you would have learned in middle school was you understood the idea Zozo, shh. Sorry about that. One of the things you learned is the fact that you have your divisions, you have your domains. And then from your domains, you're going to have a kingdom in that domain. And then you'll have a phylum. And then within that phylum, you'll have a specific class. Within that class, you'll have a specific order. Within that order, you'll have a specific family. Within that family, you'll have a specific genus. And then within that genus, you'll have a specific species. Okay. So there's a lot of fine tuning when it comes to classification of organisms. And the species is the basic unit of classification of any organism. That's the basic. That's the most basic, okay? And if we look over here, I mean, when you look at all these dogs here, it's hard to imagine, but they are all one species. They're just one species, okay? A species is a group of closely related organisms that are very similar to each other and are usually capable of interbreeding and producing fertile offspring. So as strange as it may seem, like I'd mentioned in the office hours, this, oops, Daisy, let me go back here, is this Bernese Mountain Dog and this Great Dane could have offspring, okay? They have the ability to breed and to have offspring that would be able to have offspring. They'd be really cute, by the way. They'd be so cute. Who knows if they'd be skinny or they'd be chunky. Really furry, really kind of funny. But the key thing is when you look at these, you're like, there's no way. Well, just imagine, look at all the humans on this planet, okay? We are all the same species, and yet look how different we are, okay? So just keep that in mind, that species can look very different. So what is that talking about then? If those aren't individual species, what are they? Well, they're variations of a specific species, okay? So when you have difference found within a group of organisms of any species, it's caused by genetic DNA differences, okay? That's your genotype variation. We talked about this before. And then expressed as a genetic featuring difference, which is your phenotype variation, which you look like, right? This is just a variation, and yet they're all of one species. Okay, so it's hard to keep that in your mind, because chances are you were looking at those anoles, those lizards, and going, well, of course these are all just one species. This is where the definition gets a little bit more detailed. There's more involved than just the genetic information. We're going to see that environmental pressures are going to play a role, okay? And that's one component we haven't spent a lot, actually really any time on just yet, okay? So again, the difference between a species and variation is that speciation is when an organism has had enough changes to the point where they wouldn't mate anymore. Okay, they're different species, they're different organisms, even though they look alike, okay? And then when you're looking at this situation, you're going, okay, these dogs don't look alike. That's true, but it turns out they all have the exact same number of chromosomes, and so they can mate and have offspring that can have offspring, okay? So then, the next thing is, what's an ecomorph? Well, like we said before, all of the species of the Caribbean anoles, the lizards, they can be categorized into groups. So even though these look like they're all the same kind of things or lizards, we're going to find out they can be grouped in what's called ecomorphs. Now, where did that come from? Well, this is what's helpful about it, is that their body characteristics, okay, that's morphology. So when you're studying the body characteristics of something, so now we're going beyond just the color of their fur. Now we're talking about the length of their hind legs. We're talking about the length of their tail, the length of their body. This is where it's going to become really a body characteristic. And the ecological niches that they occupy. So there's two components here. It's not just having those features, but having those features specific for one little location in which they live, okay? So it's where they're going to occupy. Now, each of these anoles or lizards are different species, Okay, so they've gotten to the point where they're so different that they won't commingle. They won't be having offspring together. They're going to stick in their just one little area, and they're just going to ignore the other. Okay, so they would not normally mate and produce fertile offspring with each other. Okay, they're going to stay in their little areas. Okay, so let's get a little bit more on ecomorph again, because this is one of those key things that you were asked to answer in that first module. In ecology, a niche is the match of a species to a specific environmental condition. The niche isn't just where the species live, but also their role in that area, okay? Whereas morphology is a branch of biology dealing with the study of the form and the structure of the organisms and their specific structural features. So if you look over here, you've been given in cartoon form 3 ecomorphs where 3 different species of organisms that appear to be the same live. So these are 3 ecomorphs, okay? This is a fundamental niche. The whole tree is considered a fundamental niche, but yet there are different separate portions of it. And this species of bird only inhabits this area. This species of bird only inhabits this area. And this species of bird only inhabits this area. So each one of those organisms has a unique, specific environmental condition in which they live. Okay. Now, how is this going to be fitting in with evolution? To the types of evolution that we're dealing with, and they actually did talk about this in the video briefly, and that was convergent and divergent evolution. So in model 2, as you're focusing on what's called the phylogeny of the anola lizards, okay, phylogeny we're going to see is the relationship between organisms. You're going to be studying the phylogeny, and that's the study of the evolutionary history of one species or a group. And phylogenesis tries to answer those basic questions. Where did a species come from? And what is it closely related to? So what is its most closely related? Where is its most common ancestor? Those are the types of questions you're trying to answer when you're dealing with phylogenetic trees. Now, the answer is less simple than just focusing on 2 organisms that they look alike, okay? So we've got a little bit more to it. So for example, if we were looking at a dolphin, we would find that a dolphin, according to this diagram, this phylogenetic tree, is actually more related to a puma. Now you're going, what? No way. Pumas don't swim in the ocean, okay? You're right, they don't. But this is where you have to go beyond just the exterior structure. There's more involved here. You would want to say that it's more related to a shark. Yet, if we looked at the shark, we would find that a shark is cartilaginous. What does that mean? It's cartilage. It's predominantly made out of cartilage. Cartilage is like the tip of your nose. You can move back and forth. Your nose is made of cartilage, okay? We'll also find out that they use gills, okay? So a shark uses gills. And they have denticles, scale denticles on their skin, okay? So a shark is very distinct. Look at the dolphin and the puma. Dolphins and pumas both have a bony skeleton. That's very different than a cartilaginous skeleton. They have lungs, okay? They don't use gills, they both have lungs. And they have mammary glands. They're mammals, okay? The way in which they give their offspring. And so even though you're looking at the exterior, you've got to be very careful, because this is where we've had to go much deeper to understand the relationship between organisms. It goes beyond just the exterior look, okay? And so by looking at these major components of these 2 organisms, this node right here is a more common ancestor. This is where the most common ancestor comes in for these 2, and then they diverge. Excuse me. Then they they separate, they become different, okay? Whereas way back here, oops-a-daisy, way back here is where the node is for all three of these organisms, okay? So this would be the most common ancestor for all of them, okay? So let's make sure we understand what convergent and divergent are, mainly because this phenomenon can be explained through two evolutionary processes that you're going to be using to answer the questions in this module. Okay, so convergent evolution, what is that? Well, that's when you have two species with different ancestors that become more similar over time. Now we're talking a huge amount of time, you guys. This doesn't happen overnight. This happens over millions, and in some cases billions of years, okay? Millions and millions, hundreds of millions of years, okay? This occurs, why? Well, it occurs when they live in similar environments, okay? So for example, like we were talking about the dolphin and the shark, they both live in water. So they're gonna share a similar environmental pressure, okay? They both are trying to swim to get their food, right? Which means that if along the line, their parents and their parents' parents' parents and their parents' parents' parents passed along traits that were beneficial for them to be able to survive in this environment, okay? That's what led to what we have today. So those advantageous traits, like a streamlined body and a powerful tail fin, they become more frequent in the population over time. Keep in mind, you guys, we're talking great amounts of time. This stuff doesn't happen overnight, okay? This isn't one generation. It's a population of numerous populations of populations, okay? So convergent evolution is, in this case, where you have two organisms that look similar, but they have very different ancestries. They have a streamlined shape due to the aquatic environment. So they're both sharing the same environmental pressure. And so over time, they both develop the same exterior, okay, to help them be able to benefit. Again, they didn't change it. It was what's passed along, and whatever was beneficial, the organisms were able to survive and then pass that on and pass that on. So again, a lot of changes happened here. Divergent, that's when you have new species develop from the same common ancestor. And so in this case, you're going to have a common ancestor, and you're going to see that all the species come right off of it. So this can occur when a shift in the environment, such as an increased or decreased competition, causes the population to develop enough new traits over time to become a new species. One of the best examples for this is Darwin's finches, okay? Because if we look at what the original Darwin finch looked like that was in South America, when it made it to the Galapagos, okay, different species of finches were derived. And the reason for that is because they had different environments in which they were trying to gather food. And so the different finch species that Darwin studied came from the same common ancestor, but they developed different traits over time as a result of having access to different food resources. Now, I don't know if you guys did that lab in middle school, but you guys used to do one where you had to try to pick up the beans with a scissors, or you had to pick it up with I'm trying to think what they're called, chopsticks, and there was different sizes of food. So you might have had big beans or small beans, or maybe you had rice, or you had popcorn, different things. They were trying to give you the idea of different types of beaks being able to pick up different types of food. And not every one of them would benefit in the same environment. So again, this is where the traits, the mutations bringing specific traits, would help you to become more beneficial. Another name of this, by the way, of this example of Darwin's finches is adaptive radiation, okay? All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into the lab. So everything prior to, if you need to stop this and go back over again those and take a couple more notes, pull out your textbook, there's tons of stuff in your textbook. If you need to stop and just kind of review everything, do so before you go on. If not, let's continue on, okay? So now you're going to go back into that website and you're going to launch the interactive button, okay, just like you did before. Only now you're going to go into module 2 where it says phylogeny, okay? Now, if the module didn't save your progress from last time, just click on the modules and go to module 2 phylogeny. Hopefully it should be able to pop up. Now, what are we trying to figure out? Again, let's give you an idea of what we're going towards so that you can be thinking about this as we're getting there. As you watch the video, consider these 2 possible scenarios. 1, did each lizard body type evolve once and then spread to other islands? Or did each type evolve independently on each island? So our goal during this module is to collect evidence that will help you to determine which of these 2 scenarios is correct. And I'll give you a little bit of hint. They're talking about convergence and divergence. So you're trying to figure out which one of those. So you're going to press continue after you watch the video, okay? Now, the next part of the module I've kind of talked about at office hours or on the office hours slide. So let me just kind of go through this with you in case you didn't see it. What is a phylogenetic tree? Well, when we look at all the different types of organisms there are out there and trying to figure out where the common ancestor is, we have to look at what's called evolutionary relationships between all the different species. So this is called a phylogenetic tree over here on the right-hand side, okay? Now, how do you read this phylogenetic tree? Well, let's talk about it. First of all, right here where the ends are, these are representing groups of descendants of species. So each one of these at this stage is a completely different species. So they would not normally breed and have offspring that can have offspring. Okay, that wouldn't happen. Now, this part right here is the most common ancestor for these 2. This would be the most common ancestor for these 4. And this is the most common ancestor for all of them, okay? If you're comparing all of them, that would be the most common ancestor. These are the nodes, and that's where the lines of the phylogenetic tree come together. And again, they represent the common ancestors, okay? So up to this point, they would be the same, and then at that point, they become different, okay? So the differences are what are, so all of this here, this root part is what they would all have in common. They would all have the exact same, whatever the DNA genetic information would be, they would have this part in common. And then when they start to branch off, this is where they become different, okay? So over here, all 4 of these are gonna have this similarities, and then this one's gonna branch off and become different. So you can see how this works. Now, the longer the line, the more time has passed. Now, the closer the ends are, in other words, the closer A is to B, C is to D, okay? The closer they are, the more related they are. So you could see that A and B are more closely related, especially because they're coming right off of this more recent common ancestor. Whereas E and A are, this is their most common ancestor, so they are not closely related, okay? Now, take the moment to watch this video. It does a really super good job to go over exactly how phylogenies are. And you want to take some really good notes. So go ahead and stop it and then go ahead and go and watch that video. The next thing you're going to do is that phylogenetic trees are built based on evidence. So how are they made? Well, they're going to be based on evidence that supports how the related 2 species are to each other. You notice I said 2, and yet there was a lot more on that previous slide because you do 2 at a time, basically, okay? Now, this evidence can be collected a lot of different ways, and usually in the regular school year, we would have done so many more things. We would have looked at fossil remains, okay? We would have looked at anatomical features and traits. What we're going to be jumping right into instead is we're going to look at the similarities and differences in the species DNA. So if you'll notice, you're going to see it's kind of really small here, but when you're looking at the slide on the video, you'll notice this has T's in it. So you know that this is all DNA, okay? And if you move and slide this up and down, you're going to find that there are 9 sets of DNA, 1 for each type of the anole lizard species. Now, the great thing about this is that you do not have to compare and contrast, which we've done in the past, and it really is challenging. What's awesome about this is that all you have to do is to highlight the entire page, okay? So you can do it section by section if you want, but you want to make sure you don't mess up. You're going to highlight the entire page, okay? And then you're going to go into where it says to click on the MABL site. Well, this is awesome, okay? Because what this website does is it's actually going to create the tree. It's going to do all of the matching for you, okay? Now, what's interestingly about this is there's more than one way for a phylogenetic tree to become produced. And so it can be iffy. You might do one way. You might find that if you did it again, it might look a little bit different. It's because there is still an openness that we'd have to bring more into the storyline. But for right now, it's one of the things you're going to want to do is you'll highlight the whole thing and then go to the MABL website, which is right there on the page. And then you're going to take it and you're going to plug it in. Now, if you'll notice over here, it's telling you that if it's a busy time frame, you might not be able to do it. You'll have to come back in and do it, okay? But I got to tell you, it's really cool doing it because it's really, I was fascinated. Being a non-biologist, I was incredibly fascinated, mainly at how computers can do all this work for us now that we used to have to manually do. So you can see on this next page here, a close-up. And again, you can see that it's got this huge list of DNA. And so you're going to paste it. Now, one of the things you're going to see down below here is it's asking you to do some other stuff that you don't need to do, okay? So you do not need to change any of the settings or give your email address. It's not necessary. Once you take this and plug it into the page, all you got to do is hit submit. That's all you got to do, okay? If the program doesn't work for you, you may skip this step and move on to the next part of the module. But for those of you that have a fascination with genetics or DNA or any of that stuff, I highly recommend you do it just because it's cool. It's just really cool on how and what now can be done to help us understand. Our computers are giving us so much better understanding of the relationship between organisms than what we had in the past. So voila, ta-da! So again, don't worry about the red numbers here. It's something you're going to get into when you get into AP. So we spent, oh my gosh, almost an hour as a department talking about it today. And we thought, no, it's way above and beyond. Let's not worry about it. We'll save it for AP for you. But when your phylogenetic tree loads, okay, leave that window open and then return to the module. And then after clicking continue, follow the module's instructions to click through each one of the windows, okay? So isn't this cool? So what it's doing here is this is giving you what would have come together, okay, based on the information of the DNA. This is showing you that these two are more closely related, okay, than maybe this one and this one, or this one and this one, okay? So again, it's showing you the relationship, the evolutionary relationship between, and each one of these is a different species, okay? All right, so when you get to these pages on your HHMI module, use the abbreviations in the parentheses to figure out which color to use on each line of the phylogenetic tree. And then click and drag the colored square to the branch, okay? So when you go back, you might find yourself having to go back and revisit how you group things together, because now it might be different, right? And so you'll see here that the trunk crowns, okay, we can see that these are the ones that are related to the trunk crowns. The twig anoles, okay, are these guys, all right? The trunk ground anoles, all right, are these guys here. And so you'll have to kind of see, because if you'll notice, all the colors haven't been put in here yet, okay? Now, this next part here is when you're starting to deal with the two locations, okay, that they're going to give you in terms of Hispaniola and Puerto Rico, okay? If you click and drag function doesn't work on your computer, you can find that the two completed phylogenies are on the next slide. So you can go through all this. If you're sitting and saying, Miss Lusky, I'm sorry, my brain is toast, just go to the next slide, because now we've given it to you. Okay, so now you can see where the this would be the information that would have come off of hopefully your data. Okay, hopefully this is what you would have come out with. Okay, and then down below you can see how readily the two different islands, the relationships between them are. Okay, and then you have two questions that you're being asked here, and this again leads right back to the whole idea of convergent and divergent evolution. Based on this phylogeny in the top one, it says, do lizards of the same body type tend to be more closely related to one another than lizards of different body types? So you have to stop and think about that. And then the bottom one is, in general, are lizards on the same island more closely related to one another than the similar lizards from other islands? Okay, so you're going to be answering those questions. And you might be going, I'm not too sure. It's okay. Go ahead and just try to figure out what you think is going on here. Keep in mind that we're trying to understand the relationship between organisms, okay? All right, so after analyzing the two phylogenetic trees, reconsider the question that was posed in the intro video. Did each lizard body type evolve once and then spread to the other islands? Did each type evolve independently on each island? So you got to stop and think, what would make more sense? Okay. So continue to click through the rest of Module 2. When you reach the end, return to the HHMI Lizard worksheet you started last class. Complete the 4 questions in Module 2 phylogeny section. When you're done, take a break because you're going to need it, okay? So take a little bit of a break. You're going to answer these questions here. I will have placed the next packet on there for you. It's like I said, it's got a lot more of the slides added to it. I did a little bit differently than Ms. Petkovic. We're doing the same exact thing. I just gave you more information on your packet in case it was helpful to have it handy. So you're doing the exact same stuff. I've just given you more stuff to have available to you. All right, so once you've done that and you've answered those questions, now you're going to go into Module 3, okay? Whew, your brain's already toast. I know it is. Okay. In Module 3, you're going to measure the hind limb lengths in 2 groups of 10 anoles. Okay, so here what they've done is they're showing you, okay, we have 2 different locations, okay? We have Iron K location and we have Experimental Island, okay? Now, you're going to measure the 10 lizard x-rays from these populations, and you're going to note that all the x-rays that you're going to measure are going to be from male lizards, okay? And if you need to remember how to do the measurements, you can always go back to Module 1 to figure out how to actually measure those hind legs, okay? So the hind limbs, okay? So now, you've done that for 2 different habitats. This is what you're doing now. Don't forget to hit record measurements, and then don't forget to do body length too, okay? All right. You're going to compare your results, okay? So you're going to plug in, of your 10, all your data here. So here's where Iron K is, okay? Hind and body, Experimental Island, hind and body, and there's 10 of them. So you're going to put all your data in here. Now, your data might not be identical to somebody else. It just depends on how accurate you are with your measurements, okay? So keep that in mind. Now, they are giving you a reference measurement table just to give you an idea of other things that you're going to find, because the computer that they're using has multiple data sets. And so it's going to choose 10. And of those 10, you might not have the same 10, for instance, as your best friends, okay? So, so it's real important that you just make sure that you plug in your data too, okay? So if you need extra help, go ahead and click on the calculations tab, okay? Because it'll give you a little bit of breakdown on how to go ahead and do that. Here's where you can see that how you're going to go about and figure this out. They're explaining to you how to calculate the hind limb length, okay? You're going to divide the hind limb length by the body length, and then you're going to enter that. That gives you the relative, all right? And so you're going to do that. This is the process you're doing right here. This is the relative hind limb length, and then you're going to do the relative tail length, okay? Actually, you did the relative tail length before. I think you're just doing the body length here. Okay, We left 2 blank for you to figure out. Okay, so calculate number 10 so you can make sure that you understand the process. Okay, so go ahead and stop for just a moment, figure out how you did it. And you're like, I don't know what they're doing. Well, figure out how we got this answer. Okay, what did we do here to get this answer? It's kind of pretty straightforward. This one might not be as obvious. Again, let's see, let's find another one that's pretty obvious. Well, that one's kind of obvious. Oh, this one's definitely obvious. So give you an idea of how you could get these answers, all right, if you're not too sure, and then calculate both of these. All right, so now you've got your data set filled in on your table. So now, comparing the 2 populations of lizards, here's the table of relative hind limb measurements for Iron Cay and Experimental Island, okay? So again, you're plugging in your answers from number 10 here. And keep in mind, the numbers you see may be different from what's shown on this slide, mainly because the computer has a huge amount of data and it's just pulling in 10 of them, okay? So after you calculate the relative hind limb length, click continue. And we're going to skip the part that's asking you to do standard deviation. So you are not going to be doing standard deviation. You can skip this part. We're not doing it. We're going to do a basic sample mean, which is really super easy. Because when you do a sample mean, that means you just add them all up and you divide by the number they are. You're basically finding the average, okay? So I'm asking you to find the sample mean for the set that you have for your Iron Cay and the set that you have for Experimental Island. So make sure you've written all these things down on your packet so that I can see what data you have that you're using with. Because keep in mind, the computer has a large sample size. Okay, again, we're going to skip a couple more parts. We're going to skip the pages about estimating the population mean in terms of finding out how they figure this out. The bars, we're going to calculating the SEM and the 95% CI. So this step, don't worry about it. You can skip by clicking continue. So just click continue, okay? And you're going to keep skipping until you reach this page here where you're building your graph, okay? So they're showing you how you figure out this stuff, but you're going to skip all of those pages until you get to this one, okay? And then you're going to build your graph. So using the sample mean you calculated, drag the blue bar graphs up. Okay, and again, just ignore the error bars. We're not worried about that. Okay, so you're creating your graph. Now, based on the trends in this graph, what happened to the hind limb length when the lizards were placed on Experimental Island? Why do you think this may have occurred? Okay, so you're thinking about this. Okay, so this is the hind limb length. This is the mean, so you're looking at the average, okay? And when we're looking at experimental, what's true about that compared to Iron Cay? So when you reach the end of Module 3, return to your HHMI Lizard worksheet that you started, okay? Complete the 4 questions in Module 3, the experimental data section. And when you're done, answer the Canvas check-in questions. That is the following. 1, George thinks that all 4 lizard body types first evolved on one island, then migrated to other islands. Use the evidence you collected in Module 2 to either support or refute his hypothesis. So do you think that all 4 lizard types first evolved on one island and then migrated to other islands? Use your understanding of natural selection from Unit 4. Provide an explanation as to why the lizards on the experimental island evolved to have shorter legs on average in Module 3. Try to include those concepts of variation, inheritance, differential survival, reproduction, and adaptation. Keep in mind, you're not going to submit your packet until the end of the lab because you still have 1 more module to do, okay? It's a good thing we got the weekend because this one might take you a little bit longer than normal. If you didn't do Module 1, you have to go back and do Module 1. You're not going to understand, okay? Keep in mind, we're trying to figure out, did things converge or did they diverge? In other words, did they come from completely different ancestry, but then come into an environment where the environmental pressures were the same, so they developed similar traits over a huge period of time with passed along genetic information? Or did they all come from a very common ancestor and then just diverge and become different? Okay, so it's all about convergence and divergence. All right, so hopefully, oh my gosh, hopefully you got all that. And I'm going to stop right here because your brains are probably toast. Okay,